Hello and welcome to the fundamentals of building a solution. Now, I do want to draw your attention quickly to the legal slide and remind you that this presentation may include some forward-looking information and that any trademarks are not necessarily endorsements by Smartsheet. Welcome, my name is Erin Harlan. I am on the product marketing team here at Smartsheet, and this session is all about building a solution. So if you have participated in any of the other sessions in the fundamentals track, we've really talked about all the building blocks of Smartsheet. So in this session, we're going to put all of that together. But before you start building, there are some fundamental things that you want to do before you actually start building. So we're going to talk about those first. Then we're going to talk about how to put those pieces together. And then finally, we have a very special guest who's going to talk to us about building adoption within your organization. So if you've joined any of the other sessions, you've learned about the building blocks and you've realized there's a lot of building blocks to Smartsheet. And one of the wonderful things about those building blocks is that they empower you to build a lot of different things. You can build a boat or a car or an airplane or even a castle. And all of those things have different uses but are built from the same set of building blocks. But before you start building, you really need a roadmap and to understand exactly what you're trying to build. So there are 4 best practices that we encourage you to do before you start building. And those are to understand your process, your goals, your roles, and your visibility. So first off, your process. Your process is actually your roadmap for your solution. So it's all the steps of your process in order from beginning to end. And I encourage you to map those out. So write them out on a piece of paper, on a whiteboard. You can use Post-it notes. You can even put them into a sheet or put them into a card view and align them. And in your process, you also want to map out where you have some of those decision points, right? There are steps in your process where if the answer is yes, we go this way, or the answer is no, we go this way. So you want to make sure that all of those things are clearly mapped out. Also, in your process, I challenge you to really look at some of those steps and decide, are all of these steps the right steps or necessary ones? Or am I willing to change my process? There may be some steps that are really manual today, and maybe I can automate some of those or streamline some of those to make my process more efficient. Next is my goal. I really want to clearly define my goal. How do I define success for my process? And the goal should be something that is measurable. So whether it's an end date, whether it's a launch, whether it's an event, whatever it is, you want to make sure that the goal is clearly defined and clearly measurable for your process. And then once you have your process defined and your goal defined, you want to outline all of the roles that are involved in your process. We don't work in a vacuum, we work with other people. And sometimes those other people are people on our own team. Sometimes those are people who are in other parts of our organization. And sometimes those folks are external folks like customers or vendors or suppliers or partners. But they are still part of our greater process. And we want to make sure that we have them accounted for. So we want to make sure that we map out all of the roles involved throughout our process. And then lastly, we also want to map out the visibility that all of those different stakeholders require in order to complete their part of the process. So for example, my executive leadership, they don't need to know all of the different pieces of the process. They probably only care about some high-level information about the goals. And maybe my customer, again, doesn't need to be involved in all the parts of the process, but I may need an efficient way to collect information from that customer. So again, understanding my process, my goals, my roles, and my visibility then helps me determine which of my building blocks I need to put together my solution. So now that we understand some key things that we want to do to kind of set the stage for building a solution, let's actually look at putting some of those building blocks together. And I'm actually going to walk through some examples that you can download and take home with you today. So these are actually some template sets that you can download from the Smartsheet Solution Center. And if you haven't used the Solution Center, you can use that either directly in the app. You can go to the plus icon in the left-hand navigation menu, or you can go to smartsheet.com/solution center and view our solutions there. But Smartsheet has over 100 templates and template sets, which are kind of like little mini building block kits, which come with some of those building blocks and are a great way to get started, especially if you're new and kind of want to get started with trying to figure out how to put building blocks together. And the nice thing is then you can customize those to best meet your needs. But I want to help you sort of understand the concept. And so I'm going to walk through some very common solution scenarios just to kind of help you see how these pieces fit together. So the first one we're going to walk through is project tracking and roll-up. And this is a really common use case for anybody who's managing a basic project. So project in Smartsheet often will start with a project sheet. A sheet, of course, is the foundational building block in Smartsheet. It's where all of your data lives. So it's where all of your project data is going to live. And you can view that project sheet as a grid. You may want to view it as a Gantt chart, especially if you're building dependencies between your tasks and building relationships. You can set filters on your project sheet. You can put some formulas on there to do some aggregation and calculation. And primarily, you can also build some automated workflows. So you can set up rules to set reminders to your team about upcoming deadlines, or alerts when things are completed, or approvals of specific tasks. But maybe you have a lot of different things happening on that project sheet, and you really want to answer some key business questions. And reports are a great way to help streamline and answer some of those business questions about what's happening in your project. And you can build 1 report, 2 reports, 10 reports, however many you need, depending on the questions you want to ask. So in this example, I've got an at-risk report, or maybe I just want to pull all the live information about the tasks that are at risk in my process or in my project. And those, of course, are live, so they're going to change as my project is being updated. And then I can also pull a milestone report. So a milestone is indicated by a 0 duration. And the nice thing about this is I can see all of those in one view, and I can even view that report as a Gantt chart. So I can see all of my milestones in this live consolidated view. And then, of course, the best way to share a lot of this information is with a dashboard. A dashboard's a communication tool. It's a great way to share the high-level information about what's happening with this project to other stakeholders. Let's look at another example. Request management. This is a very common use case. Anytime you have a process where you are collecting information from people, whether it's a survey, an order process, an IT ticket, an event registration, anything, again, where you're asking people to give you information, it's probably going to be a request management process. So anything that's request management is going to start with a form. A form is that building block that's a collection device. It's an easy way to streamline the collection of data and then, of course, bring it into a sheet. And what's nice about bringing it into a sheet is then you can organize and prioritize that information. And again, you can view that sheet in a number of ways. You can view it as a grid or calendar, or in this case, we may want to view it in a card view where we can organize and prioritize that information. And again, we can set up automated workflows. Maybe we want alerts. Maybe we need to set up an approval process for these requests coming in. And then again, we need to do some more things with that information. Maybe we need to ask some business questions. So again, a report is a great way to accomplish that. A request report will allow us to decide or determine which requests are open or which are closed, what status things are in. And then maybe we want to do some high-level aggregation and calculation, which we can do on the sheet, or we may want to bring some of that into another sheet where we just do some of that aggregation and calculation separately. And then, of course, finally, again, we can pull the key information that we want to share into a dashboard. So we can report out on the key information that we want to share with stakeholders without having to share all of the underlying information about the process. Here's a third example, meeting management. We all have meetings, so many meetings. And oftentimes it gets confusing about what did we talk about in the last meeting and what happened with that? And where are we going in the next meeting? And what's the status? Who's on first? Smartsheet has some great ways to address these issues and manage meeting information. So what I love about this solution is, again, streamlining the collection of meeting information. So maybe I have a weekly team meeting, for example. Instead of having to go via email or conversations, I can streamline the collection of agenda items from my team using a form. And of course, that will come into a sheet where I can organize and prioritize, mark them by date, run some formulas, have some alerts that new meeting request items have come in, and also track the status of some of those agenda items. And then also, again, reports allow me to easily break down and determine differences or manage some of the different work around some of those different agenda items. So I can have one report where I'm addressing past agenda items. So what have we talked about previously, and what's the status of those things? Have they been completed or not? Are they still open? Do we need to continue to talk about those items? And then I can have a separate report that is future agenda topics. What are we talking about in the next meeting? Do people need to prepare some information for that meeting? And then I can actually use a dashboard to centralize all of the pieces of this process into a portal. So I can put my reports, I can put my sheet, I can even embed that request form or that submission form directly into the portal so that all the pieces of this process are centralized in one place for my team, and they can easily come here to find everything they need for our weekly team meetings. This last example is one that uses multiple sheets, because the question I get from a lot of folks is, great, this workflow seems really easy if I have one sheet, but what if I have multiple sheets? And the thing is, once you have laid out your process, if you have built a process that is really structurally sound and works well, then you can continue to add building blocks to that process, and the process should still work the same. So let's look at a strategic plan workflow that uses multiple sheets. The process is still the same, but you can put in as many building blocks or sheets as you need, depending on the scale of this process. So say we do strategic planning for the entire company, and every department needs to submit the projects that they want to run for the year, and then the leadership team needs to approve them. Again, we're probably going to want to streamline that process because the leadership team needs the same information from all departments. So we're probably going to set up a form so that every department then submits the same information in terms of budget requirements, resource requirements, et cetera, to the leadership team. And then all of that will come into a request tracking sheet for all the project requests that come from across the company. And then there's an approval process set up on that sheet, so then the leadership team can decide which projects we're going to approve this year and which ones we're not. And then once a project is approved, then each new project gets its own project sheet. And that project sheet is built from the same template. So we're not having to reinvent the wheel each time. We know that the structure of how we're managing those projects is the same. And in this example, again, for space, I'm using 2 projects, but maybe you're building 10 projects or 50 projects, again, depending on your process. So each project sheet will be a separate project that's running for the company. And again, if I need to ask some business questions or manage work across all of those projects, reports are my superhero. The wonderful thing about reports is that they allow you to effectively manage work across multiple sheets, and they're live in real time. So reports are really the best practice, especially when you have multiple sheets. So I can have an in-progress report. Maybe I want to know which of these projects are in progress and where they are. Maybe I want to know which items are at risk across these multiple projects. I can build a report for that. And then maybe I want to do some cross-sheet aggregation calculation. Maybe I want to run my budget totals across all of my projects, for example. I can, of course, do some cross-sheet formulas on a metric sheet and calculate all of that information. And then finally, of course, I can bring all of that into a dashboard where I can share with the leadership team about this entire program and how all of my projects are running at a high level. So you can see, understanding my process, my goals, my roles, and my visibility, and then also being really familiar with all the building blocks in Smartsheet allows me to build a really powerful solution. Okay, so now that we feel comfortable with understanding how these pieces fit together and we've got an idea for building a solution, the big question we get is, great, I get it. I know which castle I'm going to build. I'm really excited. How do I get my team to start using Smartsheet? And this is the big question we get all the time. So I decided to invite a special guest to help address this, someone who is actually going through this process themselves. I'd like to welcome Tana Perkins from Charter Communications. Welcome, Tana.
Thank you, Erin.
Yeah, I'd love to start out. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself and your organization?
At Charter, we are a leading broadband connectivity company and cable operator. We serve more than 30 million customers nationwide across 41 states through our Spectrum brand. We offer a full range of residential and business services, including Spectrum Internet, TV, voice, and mobile, which I'm fortunate to work on. In my role at Charter, I actually get to lead the high-performing team that every single day delivers the impossible. I'm responsible for the strategic product roadmap for Spectrum Mobile and the rapid delivery of everything in it. And like many of those listening today, I began as a Smartsheet user and a champion, which ultimately resulted in full product ownership across the enterprise.
That's great. I'm curious, how did you first discover Smartsheet?
I might get gasps from this one, but a former colleague recommended it and I was resistant. I chose another path. So upon joining Charter, I was tasked with leading the launch of our 4th line of business, mobile. And I really just knew I needed something different that enabled transparency, was collaborative, and was scalable. And at the time, we didn't have anything that checked all of those boxes at once, because our line of business was going to touch and ultimately would touch nearly every single cross-functional team across the organization. Smartsheet got immediate airtime and kickstarted our ongoing growth from a small, very teeny business plan all the way to an entire enterprise operation, which I'm proud to say has incredibly high user engagement.
Oh, I think that's wonderful. And I think that's something common that we hear, is that once people discover the flexibility, they discover that there's a lot of options on ways that they can apply it. I'm curious, when you decided that Smartsheet was the solution you wanted to use, how did you garner support?
Well, I think the important thing for everybody to remember here is we've all been in this boat. There's some road that brought you to Smartsheet. There's some reason you landed on that website, or there's some reason you had that conversation with someone about it being a potential tool for you to use. So whatever that need is, that immediate need, start small and immediately demonstrate value with the tool at that point. Whether you're on a trial account or whether you're using it on a large enterprise account, go forth and build whatever gap you're trying to solve for. And it's not going to take you long, especially when you take advantage of things like the Solution Center, which are fantastic resources that are available to all of your users. Once you've demonstrated value, once you've built whatever that thing is that's so important to you or your leadership or the teams you work with, really work hard to obtain that leadership support. It may be easy and you may have it right out of the gate, but make sure you get that solution in front of your leadership so they know what opportunity or what gap that is filling. And then I think the last and really important thing to remember is making IT a priority. Many of the folks that very well could be listening in today, they might be the champion for Smartsheet at their company. And like me, they might be in a product organization, marketing, HR, you name it. And they don't have that initial IT support to be using or bringing on an entire enterprise tool that's going to solve some gap. So start those conversations early. And initially, it's probably worth saying that they might not support it right out of the gate. They might be apprehensive, and that's okay. And we'll talk a little bit more about apprehension as we move on.
I think that's really great advice. I love that. And I think it's really important, to your point, to bring in leadership early and bring in IT early to that conversation. I'm curious, once you garner that support from IT and from leadership, then how did you actually roll it out to the users? How did you onboard the users?
Yeah, so this was, in thinking back through this is kind of difficult for me to articulate because I attended Engage the very first year in 2017. Going into Engage, I was already excited about Smartsheet. My mindset was different than the vast majority of those either using the tool or unaware of it at Charter. And when I returned from that conference after having attended some fantastic training, which I highly recommend, I brought that training back to my organization at Charter, and I required anyone that was working on our line of business launch, project manager, analyst, or otherwise, to attend this training. So while I was super excited and enthusiastic about what I just learned and thought they would be too, they weren't, right? I required that attendance. I was sort of force feeding them. And while the training went well, and there were some really fantastic nuggets that came out of that, really great solutions, and it just fueled the fire for a lot of folks, it just fell flat because at the end of that, we didn't have full tool adoption, which is what I was hoping for. And we belly flopped.
Wow. That's some really interesting insight. Thanks for sharing that. I guess recognizing that you hadn't really gotten people invested, what did you do differently?
I had to change my focus, and kind of in line with what you had described in the earlier part of this presentation with process, goals, roles, and visibility. I just really had to define what my goals were. And my goal was to focus on adoption and ensure that people understood the value of this fantastic and flexible tool. And without them understanding that, they wouldn't ever pick it up. So I really wanted to go at this differently. And I wanted to enable employees to help employees, but I didn't have a team. So I focused on doing this with a more grassroots support model. It needed to be efficient, it needed to be sustainable, and it needed to be scalable across the organization, as I knew this would take off. So, I paused for a minute and just really kind of put my focus more on a grassroots approach. In doing so, I started with something that I like to call plant the seed. So I was seeking out the innovators. I was paying attention when someone would walk up behind me and say, what is that you're in right there? That's cool. Let me see. Is that a PowerPoint? What is that? No, it's a dashboard. And it was a conversation starter. seeking out the curious, the looky-loos, and encouraging those folks. And also those that are challenging the status quo. The same old way you've done it just hasn't worked, and now we need to pivot. Those are the people you want to bring in because you know they're going to enable themselves and arm themselves with a new tool. And then seeking out those innovators. So that's the plant the seed step. Then I stepped into a train the trainer. So many of those folks that I found in that first step might be the trainers that I was sort of hopefully banking on the fact that they would work with me and support me. So I strategically seeded licenses in other organizations outside my own. So I was paying for, a license here or a license there, not many at all, but enough to really fuel that fire and spark that sort of curiosity that I needed within those other organizations. And then that the excitement around it began to build in other places, not just around my line of business launch. So the other thing as a part of Train the Trainer is I needed to give them a path to support their learning and their growth. So making sure they were aware of what tools were available to them to get assistance or get their questions answered. And then the last step and the funnest step, I think, was creating a community and building the bench. So just further refining and developing that internal support model, but making it more about the community.
That's wonderful. Can you elaborate more on how you built out a community?
Yes, the community part, there are some really quick wins that anyone can do today to start bringing people together, not just in your own organization, but across the enterprise if needed, if there are some folks in other places. And you don't have to be a system admin or a product owner to do this either. That first step for me was creating an internal chat space. And because I had access to everyone that was a Smartsheet user, I started to invite them to that internal chat space. And initially it was like, what is this? Why am I here? But then the users started helping each other and they started answering each other's questions. And then it also built excitement around new feature launches, or if I was attending Engage, I could go message everybody and say, you guys aren't going to believe what's coming. This is so great. We've needed this feature, whatever it is. But it built excitement and enabled them to help each other. And then I started to, through a lot of adoption presentations that I've attended over the years with regard to Smartsheet specifically, I was always so shocked at the resistance or adoption. Like, why is this so hard? This is so easy. It's so easy to see the value of this tool. One of the common things I heard from people was creating some sort of an internal, your organization, your company only user group. It's free. Smartsheet will support you through it. And that was very pivotal for us. So we developed a user group lead model where there are currently 6 of them, and we're always continuing to recruit more. Those folks are any end of the spectrum, from total beginner to super advanced resource. And those resources can help each other and help people across the organization with a number of things as they have questions. Then we step into that recurring optional user group with training that we hold once a month, and it might include charter-specific use cases. It might include specific training to new features, or even roadmap conversations, which we've had before. Those are super fun. And then the last thing that we've done that has been fun, and I'd like to see us do this broader across charter, so we're brainstorming it. We call them innovation challenges. Take a problem or a gap and solve for it any way with any tools that you have. And I've held specific ones in my team surrounding specifically Smartsheet. We use Control Center, as many of the users do, for scalability at charter. And that sometimes hamstrings our users a little bit. They get so used to people provisioning projects and templates for them that they don't really think beyond that for other use cases. So this was an interesting one within my team. And because those folks really, truly wanted to do it right and learn what the tool is capable of, it also resulted in a number of product certified users across my team, because they wanted to learn before they started building. So that was a really successful effort for us.
I love that. I just want to call out a couple things that you said that I thought were really important. I love the fact that you created these internal user groups. Like, what a brilliant idea. And I love the internal challenges. Like that, what another great idea. Helping people innovate, those innovation challenges. And then of course, certification as well. I think all of those things just gold nuggets I want to call out. I think those are wonderful. I'm curious that I'm sure there must have been challenges though in this process. And I'm curious, what were the challenges that you faced and how did you address them?
I think the common challenge that you see is apprehension, and you see that organization wide. It's really important really to take pause and think, at least before you go into that conversation, about what is making this person apprehensive. What is it? Is it a tool that it could potentially replace a tool that they've used for their entire career and they're concerned about that? Or maybe they are anticipating that there's no way their leadership is going to go for it or pay for it, for that matter. Whatever the reason is, they're apprehensive. And you might experience that not just with potential users, but with your IT organization. So take pause, listen. You've prepared going into that conversation like you have potentially a negotiation. Listen to that other person. Learn, from what they're telling you about what their concerns are and what the organization concerns are. But appreciate that apprehension, because we've all been there too. And like I described, I was apprehensive in those early days, and I'm the biggest champion now at my organization. And then respond to that apprehension. The thing I have to remind myself is I have a lot of energy. I get really excited and energized by just being the force of change. And I really want to help someone, like just truly and enthusiastically help someone do something better, faster, and reduce that manual work. And sometimes people just they're not ready for that. So kind of take your energy down a notch and go into that conversation with the same energy that they have, with some optimism, of course. And then if that person is open to having those conversations further about how this could help them, talk about a solution that could potentially have some opportunity, maybe something you work with them on. So really specific to your area of influence and responsibility. Maybe every week together, you and this person work on a deck, and it takes 3 hours every week on, Tuesday. And you witness this, you're a part of it, it's painful. And you might have an idea of ways to streamline that, which I have many. And you're excited about that. Talk to them about that and how that can make their lives easier and the lives of their leadership. And always really turn this back into what's in it for them. What's in it for them? What's in it for their leadership? And take it from there. And then if you're still kind of beating your head against the wall and not making a whole lot of progress, find the spark in that same organization. I guarantee it's there somewhere. I promise you. Even if it looks like everybody is saying no, there's probably one person in the back that's looking at you a little bit different. Even though they're saying no, they're saying yes, and they want to talk more. Find that person, that supporter, that person that can help you address some of those concerns, and work together with that person to get some more insight and momentum.
I'm curious, because you sit in product, but you're now working with people across your entire organization. Do you address that differently with different parts of the business?
I do. I mean, as I described in that initial training that we held, it fell flat. That training included both my internal team that reported to me, as well as people external to my individual organization. So although the approach is largely the same, your area of influence is different. You have different authority across those two groups of people. So within your area of responsibility, if we're talking about a team that reports directly to you, or a team that rolls up to the same leadership team as your own, it's really easy in those cases to say, here's the tool we're going to use. I need your help, and get their support from there. But they still might not adopt it. They might not embrace it. So the important thing to do together is not come to them with an already baked solution of, I've tried to solve world hunger and here is how I see your world, and we know this is going to help you so much, because it's not going to meet all their needs. So involve them in a solution. Again, making it about them, their why, the important things in their world. Involve them in that solution. Allow them to provide those requirements, and also allow them to help build. The more you allow them to help build, the more vested they are in the solution. And ensure that they know that it is a continuous feedback loop. So whatever you guys roll out at the start of this thing, it's not final. Smartsheet's so flexible. That's what I always say. It's so flexible. We can continue refining the solution over time and not break anything. And then there's the outside your area of responsibility conversation. And sometimes these move a little, actually more often than not, these are the ones that move a little slower. So the creative way that I like to break through with these folks, if they are so resistant and say, no way, not interested, no thanks, is you build their reliance around relevant solutions in your area of responsibility. So if they need access to your data somehow, put it in Smartsheet, build them a dashboard, make some things pretty and make it work for them, and don't inundate them with information. But I guarantee overnight, this might be their go-to resource on a daily basis to find out what's going on with whatever that is in your world. Make it easy for them to see what changed since last time. And before you know it, if you give them that time and space, which is so important, you'll watch them pivot on a dime. And one day you'll hear them say, gosh, I wish everyone could put their data into Smartsheet. And you know that you have crossed the bridge that you've been working to cross for some time.
That is really great advice. Thank you for sharing. I'm curious, in this whole process, were there specific resources that you relied on to help onboard folks to Smartsheet?
Very much so. And because in the last year, we've really ramped up the practice of our user group leads, that has been huge for us. Some of those folks even attended Engage last year. Engage was a fantastic resource for them and really kind of built the energy across the organization. And those 6 user group leads represent our user population, as I mentioned, from beginner to advanced and expert. And those folks are champions for the tool across the organization. They are welcoming new users. They are holding these sessions that really help continue to build the bench across the organization. And I've seen just so much momentum there. And of course, the steps that we talked about before with plant the seed and train the trainer, those have been huge as well. The other one that I want to call attention to that I couldn't do without is our account team at Smartsheet. A lot of our users don't lean on enough, and I lean on them pretty hard. They will attest to that, but they have been a huge supporter in this journey and have taken the load off to a great extent.
That is wonderful. Well, you have shared so much with us. I'm curious, are there additional best practices that you would advise to someone who is new to Smartsheet or just getting started with onboarding their team to Smartsheet?
Right. In addition to what we've talked about today, and also just to continue to build upon that, I just would like to remind folks that even if you have 5 users now, maybe 1 user now, focus on the end game and what you want that end game to look like, because it's going to grow fast and sometimes you're not quite ready for it. Think of what you're doing for your organization, though. Bottom line, this is a journey. I started this journey in 2016, and 4 years later, I'm still very much on this journey of adoption with the organization. I still meet those apprehensive folks and organizations, but I know it's a challenge that we can overcome together. What you're doing for your organization isn't about adoption. It's not about them working the way that you do or using the tool that you prefer. It's not that at all. What it instead is you're bringing people and teams together and enabling their continued collaboration. You're arming their creativity. You're helping with process optimization, if not championing it. And bottom line, you are enabling your organization to deliver faster and better every single day. So with that said, it's not going to happen overnight, but If you consistently focus on your adoption, address the apprehension as it arises, just be patient because it will happen for you.
Tana, thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you for sharing your journey with us and your wealth of knowledge and experience. I mean, your gold mine of advice and best practices on how to go about this process and introduce Smartsheet to an organization and roll it out. So thank you so much.
My pleasure, Erin. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So for folks, just to kind of as a wrap up of additional resources, Tana just shared a ton of valuable ideas and best practices. But I also wanted to point to some additional resources as well. So at the beginning of the session, we talked about where to download templates and template sets. So if you're looking for some of those building blocks to get started, I encourage you to visit the Solution Center, which again, you can visit in the app itself with the plus icon in the left navigation menu, or you can go to smartsheet.com/solution center and browse the different solutions available for download. Also, if you want to take a deeper dive into any of the building blocks themselves or learn more about Smartsheet, you can visit our Help and Learning Center, which is at smartsheet.com/learning or help.smartsheet.com. It's full of tutorial videos, help articles. You can also find some templates there, and you can also sign up to join some of our upcoming webinars. And then if you're looking for some deeper hands-on, as Tana mentioned, her team took advantage of training and certification, and those were some great next steps to building champions within your organization. I highly encourage you to check that out as well. We have a fantastic training team that offers instructor-led training. We have online activity-based training, and then of course our certification program. So if you or some of your teammates want to become those champions, we highly encourage you to become Smartsheet certified. And then last but not least, the Smartsheet community is a great place to connect with other Smartsheet users, to share ideas, tips, tricks, best practices, things like that. So if you want to connect with other Smartsheet users, we encourage you to do so at our online community at smartsheet.com/community. Thank you again to Tana Perkins for joining us as our very special guest today. And thank you all for joining us for the fundamentals of building a solution. We hope you enjoyed it, and we hope you are enjoying Smartsheet Engage 2020.